Atlantis. Just the name alone feels like a spark, doesn't it? For thousands of years, it's haunted philosophers, mystics, scientists, conspiracy theorists, and probably at least one guy in your neighborhood who swears he remembers living there. And Lemuria, the lesser-known twin, a supposed lost continent that stretched across the Indian Ocean, swallowed whole by the sea after some catastrophic event. Now let me ask you something. Why do these myths refuse to die? Why does Atlantis keep coming back in movies, in books, in whispered conversations between people who half believe and half laugh? Why does Lemuria still appear in esoteric teachings, New Age channelings, and strange stories about Mount Shasta? If these places never existed, then why are they more alive in our imagination than most real cities on a map? Be honest, which sounds more exciting, Lemuria or Cleveland? Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Myths that survive for millennia are not accidents. They're signals. They're echoes of something humanity doesn't want to forget, even if the details get scrambled. And maybe, just maybe, they're not just stories about the past. Maybe they're blueprints for the future. Because what if Atlantis and Lemuria are not just tales of civilizations that fell, but warnings of civilizations yet to come? Think about it. Every culture has a story of a world that rose to incredible heights and then collapsed in a single night of fire and flood. Every tradition whispers of survivors, a few chosen ones who carried fragments of knowledge into the next age. Why does humanity obsess over this cycle? Because deep down we know it's not just their story, it's ours. Look around. Technology advancing faster than wisdom, climate shifting faster than politics, weapons that can level mountains, energy experiments that even scientists admit they barely understand. If Atlantis was destroyed by its own brilliance, if Lemuria fell because of forces it couldn't control, what do you think that means for us? Here's the uncomfortable thought. We may not be the first advanced civilization on Earth, and we may not be the last. This is where it gets really interesting. Atlantis was described as powerful, technological, domineering. Lemuria, in theosophical lore, was spiritual, primal, closer to nature. Two different ways of being human, two different blueprints for civilization. One built palaces of crystal, the other built harmony with the earth. Both ended in cataclysm. So here's the provocation. When this current version of humanity collapses, and yes, it will collapse whether in 100 years or 1,000, what kind of civilization will rise from the ruins? Will we repeat the Atlantean mistake, drunk on technology and power, destined to sink again beneath our own arrogance? Or will we finally embody the Lemurian dream, harmony, spirit, balance with the earth? And here's the twist. The answer isn't out there, waiting in some prophecy. The answer is in you. The civilizations of tomorrow are being seeded right now in the choices you make and the consciousness you cultivate. You are not just the descendant of some forgotten past. You are the ancestor of a future that hasn't yet been written. Atlantis. Lemuria. Myths. Maybe. Warnings. Definitely. And perhaps invitations. Invitations to stop being passive passengers on this sinking ship and start being architects of the next age. Because let's be real, if the next great civilization of Earth is built by TikTok trends and corporate slogans, we're doomed. But if it's built on wisdom, memory, and courage, then maybe, just maybe, we'll finally break the cycle. Welcome to the journey. Today we're diving into the mysteries of Atlantis, the enigma of Lemuria, and the civilizations yet to come. And by the end, you might realize that this isn't just their story. It's your story. It's humanity's story. And the next chapter begins now. Every myth has a birthplace. And the worlds of Atlantis and Lemuria were not born in silence. They were born in fire, in imagination, in philosophy, and in the strange collision between science and mystery. Let's begin with Atlantis. Its origin is deceptively simple. a story told by Plato more than 2,000 years ago. According to him, Atlantis was a mighty island empire, rich with knowledge, power, and ambition. It stretched far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and it dared to challenge even Athens itself. In Plato's dialogues, Atlantis was both a warning and a metaphor, a civilization so advanced, so arrogant, that it was swallowed by the sea in a single night of catastrophe. Was it an allegory, a moral lesson, or a memory whispered from a time before time? That question has never stopped echoing. Now, Lemuria's story is stranger. Unlike Atlantis, it didn't emerge from philosophy, but from science, or at least science as it was practiced in the 19th century. A zoologist named Philip Sclater was puzzled. How could lemur fossils be found in India, Madagascar, and Africa if lemurs can't swim across oceans? His solution was bold, maybe reckless. There must have been a massive continent, a land bridge now lost beneath the waves. He called it Lemuria. What began as a scientific hypothesis quickly mutated into something else. Mystics, occultists, and visionaries like Helena Blavatsky took Lemuria out of the zoology journals and placed it into the grand tapestry of human destiny. Suddenly, Lemuria wasn't just about lemurs. It was about root races, cosmic cycles, and the forgotten ancestors of humanity. And so we have two continents, two myths, born from two very different parents. Atlantis from philosophy, Lemuria from science. One a moral fable of hubris, the other an attempt to explain fossils. And yet somehow both stories grew into legends of golden cities, ancient wisdom, and cataclysmic destruction. Both became symbols of what humanity longs for and fears most: greatness and collapse. Here's the part people overlook. Atlantis and Lemuria are not really about geography. They are about psychology. They are the mirror of humanity's own contradictions. Atlantis represents our thirst for progress, our obsession with technology, our hunger for dominance. Lemuria represents our yearning for harmony, for spiritual purity, for a lost innocence we can never quite recover. Together, they form a mythic polarity, two poles of the human soul. And just as the magnetic poles of Earth sometimes shift and collapse, so too do the poles of our inner world. Civilizations rise on one pole, fall on the other, and then rise again. So the birth of these two forgotten worlds is not just about lost lands. It's about the eternal human drama, the dream of building heaven on earth, and the nightmare of watching it all sink beneath the sea. And the question that should haunt us is not, did Atlantis or Lemuria exist? The real question is, why do we keep dreaming them into existence again and again? Because if myths are mirrors, then maybe Atlantis and Lemuria are not behind us, but ahead. If Atlantis and Lemuria are the two forgotten worlds, then what happens when worlds collide? The legends tell us they did not coexist in peace. They clashed, not just as continents, but as visions of humanity itself. Atlantis was described as powerful, technical, and ambitious, a civilization obsessed with mastery over the elements. Flying crafts, crystal technologies, energy so advanced it almost sounds like science fiction. They wanted to control, to expand, to dominate. If Atlantis was a person, it would be that ambitious CEO who works 90 hours a week and tells you he's crushing it, while secretly ignoring the fact that his empire is crumbling from within. Lemuria, on the other hand, was said to be primal, spiritual, closer to the rhythms of the earth. Its people were giants in some accounts, childlike in others, but always portrayed as living in harmony with nature and with forces unseen. If Atlantis was skyscrapers, Lemuria was sacred groves. If Atlantis was power, Lemuria was balance. If Atlantis said build higher, Lemuria said listen deeper. Of course, myths never stay polite. In esoteric traditions, from Blavatsky to Edgar Cayce, these two civilizations disagreed not just about technology or politics, but about the destiny of Earth itself. Atlantis wanted to rule, to impose its order on all tribes and peoples. Lemuria resisted, believing humanity must grow freely, each culture in its own rhythm. And like every argument in history, it escalated. Some say they fought with weapons beyond imagination, energy beams drawn from crystals, machines that harnessed the Earth's core, fire so intense it burned the skies. Others say it was less about bombs and more about spiritual warfare, manipulation of thought, corruption of leaders, struggles in dimensions we can barely perceive. Whatever the case, the story always ends the same: catastrophe. Two continents dragged into war until neither survived. But here's the uncomfortable part. This isn't just their story, it's ours. Look around. Do you see the Atlantean impulse? Of course you do. Every shiny gadget, every algorithm that knows you better than you know yourself, every empire of data and power, that's Atlantis reborn. And the Lemurian impulse? You see it too, in movements for ecological balance, in spiritual practices that return us to breath, in communities trying desperately to live in harmony with the planet. And just like the myths, these two impulses are not peacefully coexisting. They're colliding, right now, in your lifetime. The clash of civilizations is not about two lost continents long gone. It's about the battle being fought inside humanity's soul at this very moment. Domination or harmony, control or freedom, arrogance or humility. So when you hear the stories of Atlantis and Lemuria at war, don't just picture continents sinking beneath waves. Picture yourself. Because the battlefield is not under the ocean, it's inside you. And here's the haunting question: which side will you choose? Every myth has its climax. For Atlantis and Lemuria, that climax is always the same: destruction. The great civilizations do not fade gently into history. They fall, violently, suddenly, catastrophically. The details vary depending on who tells the story. Plato says Atlantis was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night. Theosophical writers describe Lemuria cracking apart in fire, volcanoes ripping its lands into islands that eventually sank beneath the waves. Edgar Cayce spoke of advanced Atlantean technologies that destabilized the Earth itself. Others point to comet impacts, solar storms, even nuclear wars waged by ancient gods. But whether by water, fire, or hubris, the theme never changes. The Earth rises against arrogance, and civilizations built on imbalance cannot survive. Think about that. In nearly every culture across the planet, we find echoes of this same event. A great flood, a world consumed by fire, a sky torn apart. From the Mayan Popol Vuh to the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, from Hindu texts that speak of cycles of destruction to the biblical story of Noah, the details differ, but the warning is identical. Something happens, something resets the board, and humanity has to begin again. Why does this story haunt us? Why does every culture insist that we once lived through a catastrophe that erased almost everything? Is it just coincidence? A shared psychological fear of mortality? Or are these not metaphors at all, but memories passed down from survivors who really watched their world collapse? Imagine the terror. One day you are living in a shining city, harnessing powers you barely understand, walking streets lined with temples or forests alive with hidden wisdom. And then the ground shakes, the sky burns, the ocean roars. Everything you thought permanent, your home, your temples, your civilization, vanishes in hours. And worse, the survivors know it was not just nature that destroyed them. It was themselves. The arrogance of Atlanteans, the resistance of Lemurians, the clash of visions, the refusal to live in balance. The Earth merely finished what humanity began. In esoteric traditions, the destruction of Atlantis and Lemuria is not just history, it's karma. Civilizations are subject to the same law as individuals. What you sow, you reap. When greed, hubris, and imbalance define a culture, the collapse is not punishment, it is consequence. Now pause and look around you. Are we not replaying the same pattern? Rising seas, burning forests, cracking skies, weapons powerful enough to end everything in a single day. Technologies that bend reality, but without wisdom to guide them. If myths are mirrors, then what do you see staring back at you? The cataclysm of Atlantis and Lemuria is not only a story of the past, it is a prophecy for the present. Because civilizations do not fall in some distant mythological age, they fall in real time. They fall when arrogance grows faster than wisdom. They fall when we mistake power for progress. The haunting question is not whether Atlantis or Lemuria were real continents. The haunting question is whether we are their reincarnation. Are we living through their final chapter all over again? And if so, will our fall be by water, fire, or something far more subtle? A collapse not of cities but of souls. Because here's the truth nobody likes to face. The end never comes when you expect it. To the Atlanteans, the world was permanent, until the day it wasn't. To the Lemurians, the earth was eternal, until it cracked beneath their feet. Civilizations always believe they are immune to collapse, until the ocean arrives, until the fire consumes, until it is too late. And yet, in the ruins, something remains. Survivors, memory, seeds. The cycle resets, but not everything is lost. This is why these myths are not just tales of doom. They are also whispers of hope. Because if humanity has fallen before and risen again, then maybe, just maybe, collapse is not the end. It is the doorway. But doorway to what? To another Atlantis, brilliant but arrogant? To another Lemuria, spiritual but vulnerable? Or to something entirely new, a civilization that finally learns the lesson hidden in every myth of destruction? The fall of Atlantis and Lemuria is more than tragedy. It is a mirror held to our future. And the reflection is asking one question: what kind of world will rise from the ashes of this one? Every story of destruction carries with it a quieter, more haunting story, the story of survival. Because myths never end with everyone died. No, they end with a remnant. A few. The ones who carried fragments of memory into the next age. The fall of Atlantis and Lemuria was not the end. It was the beginning of something hidden. The esoteric traditions whisper that survivors of Lemuria fled deep into the earth. That they carved cities into mountains, concealed themselves in caverns, and built what we now call Agartha. They are said to have preserved their knowledge not in libraries of paper but in crystal halls, where vibration itself stores memory. Some traditions claim their descendants still walk among us, tall, luminous beings glimpsed on rare nights near Mount Shasta, where the city of Talos is said to pulse beneath the stone. Others speak of Atlantean refugees who scattered across the globe, leaving traces of their brilliance in megaliths, temples, and myths. Did they shape the pyramids of Giza? Did they seed the legends of gods in South America? Did their lost science become the magic of later cultures? Nobody can prove it, but the fingerprints are everywhere. Then there are the stories of Kumari Kandam, the Tamil legend of a sunken land once ruled by wise kings, swallowed by rising seas. Some believe its people migrated into South India, carrying with them fragments of language, cosmology, and spiritual practices that still survive today. Everywhere you look, the same pattern emerges. A continent falls, and yet its soul survives. It hides, it waits. And that is the paradox. The destruction of Atlantis and Lemuria is remembered not because of what was lost, but because of what endured. Knowledge buried in symbols, seeds of wisdom disguised as myths. Survivors who became wanderers, teachers, or gods. But here's the deeper truth. The survivors are not just characters in ancient legends, they are us. Humanity itself is the survivor of endless cataclysms. We carry trauma we do not remember. Why do floods and apocalypses haunt our dreams? Why do we tell stories of gods who taught us after great disasters? Because deep in our collective soul, we know we've been through this before. And here's the uncomfortable thought. Survival is not the same as victory. Survivors inherit scars. Survivors forget. Survivors distort. The wisdom carried forward from Atlantis and Lemuria was fragmented, twisted, half-remembered. That is why we inherit myths, not manuals. Stories, not instructions. But maybe that is the point. Maybe knowledge is never meant to be preserved perfectly. Maybe each age must rediscover it, reshape it, and decide how to use it. And so the hidden legacy of Atlantis and Lemuria is not crystal technology or sunken ruins waiting to be found. Their true legacy is the question they left us. What will you do with survival? Because here's the truth. Cataclysms will come again. They always do. Whether by fire, flood, or folly, our civilization too will crack and tremble. But when it does, some will endure, and the survivors of this age will carry forward only what they choose to remember. Will they remember TikTok dances and celebrity gossip? Or will they remember the wisdom of balance, humility, and spirit? That is the hidden legacy. It's not about whether Atlantis or Lemuria were real continents. It's about whether we are wise enough to be the survivors who finally carry forward more than ruins. The civilizations of tomorrow will not be built on the ruins of our cities. They will be built on the ruins of our choices. And the survivors will decide what story humanity tells next. So the question is not, did Atlantis or Lemuria survive? The question is, will we? And if we do, what will we leave behind for those who rise after us? For centuries, Atlantis and Lemuria were dismissed as fantasy. Allegories, scholars said. Esoteric inventions, skeptics scoffed. To even mention them in academic circles was to invite ridicule. But then, science began stumbling into the shadows of myth. Not because it wanted to, but because truth has a way of forcing its way back into the light. It began with accidents. In 2013, geologists studying the volcanic island of Mauritius discovered minerals that should not have been there. Fragments of zircon billions of years old. This was impossible. Mauritius is a young island, geologically speaking. Those minerals belonged to something far older. The conclusion was shocking. Beneath the Indian Ocean lies the remains of a lost continental crust. They called it Mauritia, a continent hidden under the waves. Sound familiar? It should. Because the place they found matches almost exactly where myths placed Lemuria. And it doesn't stop there. In 1968, divers in the Bahamas stumbled upon massive stone blocks arranged like a road, now called the Bimini Road. Mainstream archaeologists say it's a natural formation, but natural formations don't usually align in straight lines stretching into the deep. Edgar Cayce predicted Atlantis would be discovered in that very region. Coincidence? Or the universe playing with us? Far away off the coast of Japan lies Yonaguni. Submerged terraces, staircases, structures that look eerily artificial. Officially, they are just natural erosion. Yet divers who descend into those waters describe the overwhelming feeling of entering something built, something sacred. Could this be the eastern edge of a world that maps and textbooks refuse to remember? Then there is Dwarka, off the coast of India, a city long thought to be pure legend, described in Hindu texts as the dwelling place of Krishna himself. For centuries, it was a myth. Until archaeologists actually found it, beneath the waves, complete with streets, walls, and artifacts. What was once mythical suddenly became historical. Sound familiar? And in 2001, sonar scans off the coast of Cuba revealed what looked like an entire submerged city, nearly 2,000 feet underwater. Pyramids, geometric structures, patterns no accident of nature could reproduce. Scientists still debate it, some dismiss it, others remain silent. Because to admit such a discovery would mean rewriting history from the ground up. Here's the irony. Every time science digs too deep, it uncovers something that makes the myths harder to ignore. A road in the Bahamas, a monument in Japan, a city in India. a hidden continent beneath the Indian Ocean. It's as if the Earth itself is conspiring to remind us of what we want to forget. So maybe the skeptics are right. Maybe Atlantis and Lemuria, as described in esoteric lore, never existed. But the ocean does not care about our skepticism. It hides secrets in plain sight. And every once in a while it lets one slip through, just enough to remind us that we don't know as much as we think we do. The truth is this: science and myth are not enemies. They are dance partners. Myth preserves memory in symbols. Science uncovers fragments in stone, and together they form a picture more powerful than either alone. So when science accidentally confirms the myth, what it's really confirming is this: humanity's memory is deeper than textbooks, older than geology, and more stubborn than skepticism. And if our forgotten past keeps resurfacing in shards and ruins, what does that say about our future? Maybe it means the next Atlantis, the next Lemuria, is already waiting, and science will be the last to admit it. If Atlantis and Lemuria were civilizations of the past, then what about the civilizations of the future? Because here's the truth: the story doesn't end with ruins under the ocean. It ends, or begins, with us. History, myth, geology, prophecy, they all point to the same uncomfortable pattern. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall. They shine like fire for a while, then vanish into the waves of time. And then, after the ashes settle, survivors begin again. Which means that if the cycle is real, then the question is not whether there will be future civilizations. The question is, what kind of civilizations will they be? Will the next Atlantis rise again, a world obsessed with technology, power, control? Picture cities of gleaming towers and impossible machines, humanity harnessing energy beyond comprehension, flying through skies on crystal ships, until arrogance poisons the root, and once again the ocean comes calling. That's one future. Or maybe it will be another Lemuria, a civilization not of skyscrapers but of forests, not of domination, but of communion. A world where people live in harmony with the planet, where wisdom is measured not in data, but in spirit, where progress means balance, not conquest. A future more mystical, more primal, a return to innocence. But let's be honest, both of these futures carry shadows. Atlantis was brilliant, but arrogant. Lemuria was spiritual, but fragile. One drowned in hubris, the other burned in fire. So maybe the next civilization cannot simply repeat the past. Maybe it has to transcend it. Think of it this way: humanity is at a fork in the road. One path leads to the Atlantean future, dazzling but doomed. The other leads to the Lemurian dream, peaceful but vulnerable. And then there is a third path, the civilization we have not yet imagined. A synthesis, a union, a new archetype. Because maybe the purpose of remembering Atlantis and Lemuria is not nostalgia, it's evolution. They are not destinations to return to. They are warnings, blueprints, prototypes. Their memory is not telling us go back, it's whispering go beyond. So what would that look like? Imagine a civilization that masters technology but never forgets humility, that builds with crystal and steel, but never loses reverence for soil and breath. That explores the stars, but remembers the earth as sacred ground. A civilization that learns from Atlantis's brilliance without repeating its arrogance, and from Lemuria's spirituality without repeating its naivete. That is the future civilization yet to come. But here's the catch. It won't be born after the collapse. It's being born now. In the decisions you make, in the movements rising across the planet, in the way people are already questioning the old systems. Every seed of consciousness planted today is the foundation of tomorrow's world. So don't think of Atlantis and Lemuria as ghosts of a lost past. Think of them as teachers. One taught us what happens when power outruns wisdom. The other taught us what happens when purity cannot withstand fire. Their graves are our textbooks. Their ruins are our roadmap. And the civilization yet to come? That's the exam. Because the real myth is believing history is behind us. The real story is that history is a spiral, and we are about to turn the next curve. And whether that curve leads to glory, collapse, or transcendence depends on us. So ask yourself, when future generations whisper about our world, will we be remembered as the arrogant Atlanteans, the fragile Lemurian, or the first civilization that finally broke the cycle? The future is not waiting, it's already calling. And it's asking a very simple, very dangerous question. What kind of ancestors do you want to be? So here we are. The myths have been told, the continents have risen and fallen, the oceans have swallowed, the fire has consumed, the survivors have whispered, and science has stumbled upon the bones of forgotten worlds. But in the end, this is not a story about Atlantis. This is not a story about Lemuria. It is a story about us. Because every myth is a mirror, and the one we are staring into tonight is not showing us the past. It is showing us the future. Think of it this way. If Atlantis and Lemuria are echoes of cycles that repeat, then we are standing on the edge of the next cycle right now. The signs are everywhere: rising seas, crumbling systems, technologies that dazzle but terrify, movements for harmony colliding with empires of control. The same polarity, the same battle, the same dangerous illusion that this time will be different. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This time isn't different, unless we make it different. Unless we finally learn the lesson hidden in the ruins. Atlantis fell because brilliance without humility becomes arrogance. Lemuria fell because innocence without strength becomes vulnerability, and we are caught between their ghosts, repeating their mistakes. But maybe, just maybe, the real purpose of remembering them is not to repeat them, but to transcend them, to build something new, to step into the future not as Atlanteans, not as Lemurians, but as something beyond both. A civilization that can wield power and keep humility. A civilization that can love the earth and still reach for the stars. A civilization that finally remembers balance. That choice is not centuries away. It is not waiting for survivors after the collapse. It is here. It is now. It is being made in every action, every breath, every moment of awareness. The civilizations yet to come are not waiting beneath the sea. They are waiting inside us, in you, in me, in all of us. And whether they rise as ruins or as revelations depends on the story we decide to tell with our lives. So the question is not, did Atlantis exist? Did Lemuria exist? The real question is, what civilization will exist because of you? Will we be remembered as the arrogant Atlanteans who drowned in their own brilliance? As the fragile Lemurians who burned in their innocence? Or as the first humans who finally broke the cycle? Who finally turned myth into evolution? The myths are not asking us to believe. They are asking us to choose. And that choice begins today. Because the future is not a prophecy, it's a decision.